Hi, everyone, and welcome back for part 3 of our series on getting motivated to learn at home. For part 3, we're going to talk about sleep, and the reason sleep is important is because it is really related to kind of how we're going to continue to stay engaged to learn at home, because if we're not sleeping well, it affects so many parts of our lives. So that's really the focus of this part, and most of the students that I'm talking to who are reporting having a difficulty staying motivated to do schoolwork are telling me that their sleep isn't good either. So this is a topic that's really important and we could talk a lot more about. So I'll just do like a general overview today about why sleep's important for staying motivated and engaged to learn. So uh, adolescents need about 8 to 10 hours of sleep, but typically get only 7 hours or less per night. And the teens that I'm talking to are certainly getting a lot less than that. And staying up really late at night, being engaged with others or playing video games or doing maybe catching up on their schoolwork that they didn't get done earlier and they're crunching to get some things done before it's due. So sleep is really important, and that's because a lot of things are affected by not getting enough sleep or being sleep deprived. So in terms of your mood, when you haven't had enough sleep, you're much more likely to get irritable or frustrated. That makes sense. We know that we get grouchy when we haven't slept or when we're overtired. So it's really important if you're considering that your mood might be a problem, and it would be really normal right now for there to be mood issues given everything that is going on. But it is important to consider that if we can get our sleep in order, that would be a really good place to start in terms of helping our mood improve. It impacts our behavior. So sleep deprivation in adolescence has been linked with higher risk behaviors. And so it's just really important to stay safe right now. And it's always really important to stay safe right now. It's important to consider how you can keep safe, keep yourself doing well, and getting good sleep is important to that. When it comes to our thinking, and similar to our mood in that way, we're just less likely to be able to manage stressors and overwhelming thoughts and feelings that come up for us. Our thinking might tend to be more negative when we're sleep deprived. Okay, that our academic performance is impacted because our attention and our ability to focus would be highly diminished when we have not had enough sleep. So if you're a student saying you're having difficulty engaging in your learning and stay motivated to learn, and you're also telling me you've had 7 hours of less for sleep most nights, then generally that would be something that you'd want to consider. Okay, especially if you're feeling like, why can't I focus, or why can't I, pay attention for a longer period of time, or I'm finding it difficult to stay focused through my online learning. That would be a really important piece to consider that could be impacting you. Athletic performance, that's because of response time, and driving as well in terms of high risk behavior and response time. So, and we certainly don't want to be falling asleep at the wheel. So it's really important for your whole being to be sleeping well and to be consistent with your sleep. And I think what would be important is to consider that there are some tips for improving sleep that are going to include having a really consistent routine. Because if you're saying, well, I always ask students, like, on average, so in the last week or in the last 2 weeks, what has your sleep schedule been? And oftentimes it's really all over the place. There isn't really kind of a consistent bedtime and wake up time. And so you want to start by keeping track of that. So maybe for a week or two, you keep a diary. And that doesn't have, again, you don't have to formally keep a diary. You can just write it on a piece of paper, track it in your phone. There are sleep tracking apps if that's something you're interested in. You could just jot it down each day, when you went to bed and when you wake up. So when you wake up in the morning, you could have a general idea of when you fell asleep and then what time you woke up at. If you happen to have a nifty kind of fitness tracking watch or a smart watch, you may already have the ability to track your sleep. So that might be something kind of cool if you're interested in that. You want to maintain a sleep schedule. So as much as possible, you want to actually fall asleep and wake up in the same time every day. And what's really important to consider is to avoid napping. So a lot of teens that I talk to say that they don't get enough sleep at night, but that they do find themselves napping in the day. And I would say mostly just to avoid napping if you're trying to develop a sleep routine. And the reason is that if you get in the habit of napping, on the days that you nap, you're likely going to stay up later, have a harder time falling asleep early. And then that creates that pattern and that habit of going to bed later. So napping should be reserved for times in which your sleep schedule is off for reasons that you can't really control. Let's say there's been some maybe events that have gone on that kept you up later in the night, and you didn't have a choice, and so now you need to catch up on and take care of your body, so you would have naps. If you're sick, you're not feeling well, certainly napping is really good for rest and healing, but it wouldn't be your strategy for coping with sleep deprivation because of procrastinating on your schoolwork and staying up late to get things done, or staying up to play video games or socializing. Okay, and you want to be consistent with the sleep schedule even on the weekend. So there's some flexibility with that, but really only by about an hour in order to really keep your sleep up and to maintain good sleep. So if as often as possible, you want to maintain this schedule. And if you're not feeling well, or you're feeling particularly moody, or feeling particularly run down, you want to be extra careful that even on the weekends, you keep your routine in place. If you want to have a nap, the weekend can be a nice time to do that, but just really be careful about what time you're doing it, because you don't want to be up late at night. So if you're sleeping late in the day or sleeping for a long period of time, or napping, I should say, you're going to have a hard time falling asleep that night. So keep that in mind. You want to create a sleep-friendly environment. So in part one of this series, we talked about creating a motivation-friendly environment for learning. And this is the same thing with sleep. And if you recall, in part one, we talked about how we want our learning environment as often as we can, and when available, to be outside of the bedroom. And we want it to be comfortable, but not too comfortable. So we don't want it to take place on a couch or a bed, especially. So we want to actually reserve our bedroom for sleeping. And we want that to be really comfortable for us. So think of things like, is my bed comfy for me? Does it cause me aches and pains? And are there things you could do to make it more comfy? You want to make sure the temperature is cool. So it's better to feel cooler than warm when it comes to sleep. So you want it to be a little bit on the cool side, would be most comfortable for most of us. You want it to be quiet as much as possible. If you're somebody that you need something to break that silence, then you could do something like a sleep app, where there's like soft music or different kind of sleep promoting sounds. And you also want it to be dark, and you especially want it to be dark because of things like blue light. So if you've got a television or other technology that emits a blue light, that's something that's not good for us in terms of sleep promotion. So it can mess with the production of melatonin in our brains, and then we're having a harder time sleeping. Okay. And you also want to have a bedtime routine. So I always say, think of yourself like a baby or a toddler or a kid, the kinds of things, when it comes to how you take care of yourself at bedtime, what kinds of extra tender loving care do you give yourself to let your body know and your brain know that we're getting ready for sleep. So those are things like whether it's bathing or your hygiene routine. Do you read? Do you listen to music? What do you do to sort of get settled? And you want to start thinking of those things an hour before you plan to sleep. So if your bedtime is 10:30, by 9:30 you could start considering, integrating your sleep routine. So some things to keep in mind are exercise. So exercise is really good to promote sleep, especially now where we're spending a lot of time in our homes or in a more stationary spot. You want to see, we talked about this, I believe, in part 2, where we talked about planning and time management, is taking breaks. And things like exercise are a great way to take a break. So if walking feels good for you, taking a walk break 2 or 3 times in your day, even. They can be short breaks. Exercise is good, getting your heart rate up. These are things that are going to help tire you into the evening. I have lots of teens saying they're just not tired, and that could just be because we're not kind of doing enough in the day to get tired. So exercise is a great option. You just want to make sure you're not exercising within like too close to your bedtime. So definitely not within that hour time frame before bed, and especially more rigorous activities you want to avoid doing close to your bedtime. Taking breaks outside is really important, because when we are exposed to sunlight and natural light, like through an open window or by taking our walks outside, it wakes up our body. It lets our bodies know that it's daytime, and in daytime we're awake. And so that's what helps, is when the sun goes down at night, it again signals that same part of us to know, okay, it's bedtime, now I sleep. Eating is really important. So it would be really hard to sleep on an empty stomach. So when you're too hungry, it's going to be hard to sleep. And if you've had a really, really big meal, you need to give yourself a little bit more time to digest before falling asleep, because it could disrupt your sleep. You might find it harder to fall asleep, or that you're waking up throughout the night. Things like caffeine and energy drinks would be really good to avoid if you're having any sort of sleep issues. If your sleep is good, they don't have to have a role in your life at all. So really considering, if you are having any caffeine, how does it affect you, and how does it affect your sleep? So if you're doing something like sleep tracking, you might want to include the days that you've had some form of caffeine, and take a look at what happens on those days versus the days where you didn't have any caffeine. And then save worries for another time by writing them down. So bedtime would not be a good time to start processing through maybe some complicated things that you've got going on. Or if you're having worries about maybe something in the future, something that might happen the next day, it can be really helpful to write them down. It's sort of like engaging this process of taking it from inside your mind onto paper. You could do this also by talking it out with somebody close by, just to help you to get some, reassurance and calm before falling asleep. So you really want to, disengage from the worried thinking, and find some way to cope with it. And certainly that we could do a whole topic on coping with worries. So writing them down would be one strategy I would share with you today, as a way to get it out of your mind so that you can sleep. And then you want to plan difficult conversations to occur earlier in the day too. So if you're planning to have a difficult conversation with somebody that you care about, or maybe you're having a difficult time with somebody and you're needing to address the situation, too close to bedtime is not a good idea, because chances are it's going to bring up some overwhelming feelings for you. It might take time to process that through and to sort of feel restful and ready for bed. So you want to make sure you give yourself plenty of time before bedtime. Okay. So that's it for sleep. Sleep is really important. I'd love to talk more about sleep with you. So stick around for part 4, where we talk about things that parents can do to help their kids with some of these strategies in relation to motivation and learning at home. And then a really important topic, which is, where can we go when more help is needed, or what can we do? Okay. See you.